Case file BS68-2. Rapture. A city built on promises and pride. Promises that rotted the minute they touched the ocean floor. After the fall of Andrew Ryan, the old ideals of free enterprise didn't stand a chance. In the void left behind, something else grew. Something worse. Sophia Lamb. A woman with the smile of a saint and the hands of a butcher. But my story tonight isn't about her. Not entirely. It's about the first Big Daddy to ever bond with the little sister. A poor bastard named Subject Delta. In 1958, Subject Delta wasn't just metal and muscle. He was the prototype. The first successful pairing between a Big Daddy and a little sister. Eleanor Lamb. The bond was more than mechanical. It was chemical, emotional. Delta would have torn apart the sea for her, but to Sophia Lamb, that kind of devotion was poison. Self-interest disguised as love, a threat to the order she wanted to build. So, she laid a trap. Splicers attacked, and with Delta distracted, she struck with the hypnotized Big Daddy plasmid and turned Delta's love into a leash. Then, calmly, she handed him a pistol. Just like that, he was gone. But then, the impossible happened. Delta woke up 10 years later, groggy, drenched, inside a Vita chamber, alone. The city around him was nothing but rot and echo. And in his mind, whispers. Not words, not yet. Just fragments. Something old, familiar, pulling him like a string tied to his bones. Outside, Rapture creaked and screamed like a dying well. Inside, something worse was waking up with him. The city hadn't stayed quiet. In Ryan's place rose the family. Sophia's chosen. Splicers with glazed eyes and holy zeals, their bodies marked with purple butterflies painted across walls, skins, and broken glass. The butterfly was no mere ornament. It was a promise. Across the walls you can see written, "We will be reborn." This wasn't politics. It was faith. And Lamb was their leader. Among the graffiti and blood, Delta found something else. A small water-stained blue book. Its leather covered crumbled with salt and time. Unity and Metamorphosis. Not printed. Handwritten. Each word inked by Sophia Lamb herself. It was her scripture. A manifesto of unity, sacrifice, and absolute control. To the broken, the desperate, it wasn't madness, it was salvation. And then, a voice from the past, Dr. Bridget Tenenbaum, a scientist who made the Little Sisters and spent her life now trying to undo them. She reached out to Delta with a warning. Eleanor was alive, but being reshaped into something new. Tannenbaum, however, couldn't stay. She was being haunted. So she handed the mission off to someone else, Augustus Sinclair. Sharp, slick, survival first. No promises, just opportunity. Soon after, Delta found it, a broken gatherer's garden flickering in the dark. Inside, a plasmid vial, electrobolt, and a message drawn in chalk. Colorful, childish, desperate. Hurry, Daddy. Come soon. Find me. No voice, no map. Just the last messages of a girl calling through the dark. Even imprisoned, Eleanor was still reaching out. Delta jammed the plasmids into his veins. Lightning surge. Purpose returned. This time, he wasn't moving on orders. He was moving for her. His weapons came back like muscle memory. The drill, the rivet gun, his old tools. And the enemies came crawling with him. Splicers, twisted and howling, their minds drowned in Lamb's sermon. Every wall wrote a new gospel. Butterflies over every inch of what Rapture used to be. But Delta fought. Not for philosophy, not for ideology, but for her. But then came the scream. Not human, not just animal, just rage and metal in perfect harmony. Faster than any splicer, stronger than any big daddy, she moved like a shadow, struck like a hammer. She was everything Delta used to be, and something worse. He barely survived the fight, and he knew with certainty this wasn't the same Rapture he remembered. The real monsters had grown up while he slept, and somewhere out there, Sophia's lamb was watching. And the family, well, they were just sharpening their knives. The Atlantic Express, that was the way out of Adonis. But like everything else in Rapture, it was locked down, rusted over, and humming with old paranoia. Sinclair patches through again.
As you can see, Chief, the station here's iced over. To reach Eleanor Lamb at Fontaine headquarters, we'll have to clear the way. Now, in order to melt that ice, you'll need a plasmid like a handful of hellfire.
Of course, because nothing in this city ever came easy. Ryan Amusements, Rapture's educational playground. But the only lessons here were propaganda, dressed up with paint and wax. Each exhibit taught the same thing. The parasite wants your life, and only a man who owns himself is truly free. Wax figures of government agents stealing crops, animatronic beggars painted as predators, a smiling family turned into leeches. Andrew Ryan raised Rapture's children on fear and taught them the word we. But now, the halls are silent, and Lamb's people had moved in. The old murals were cracked, the mannequins decayed, but the walls, they were alive with anger. Ryan's face had been destroyed, the word liar printed across his face, and a fresh message has been added. Lamb lives. And just beneath it, a dripping purple butterfly. This wasn't just a city crumbling. It was a war between ghosts. But still, the whispers in Delta's skull turned into a voice, clear, soft, familiar. You're close, Father. I can feel you. Trapped, but awake, Eleanor still reaching out through whatever was left of their bond. Delta followed her messages through the park, chalk scrawled on walls. She was guiding him. Then came the crossroads. After killing a big daddy, next to him a little sister, blinking up at Delta like he'd never left. She didn't run. She knew who he was. And that's when the city offered its first bargain. Rescue her, free her from the atom and the condition, or harvest her and tear the power from her veins. but she wouldn't survive. He lifted her gently. He chose to protect because deep down he still remembered what it meant to be a father. Sinclair stayed in his ear, helpful. Sure, maybe too helpful. Delta didn't trust him, but he needed him for now. Delta found the override control behind one of Ryan's old exhibits and flipped it. The train sputtered back to life, groaning and shuddering like it hadn't moved in years. Lights flickered, doors open. The way forward was clear. Then came her voice, Sophia Lamb. He didn't answer, he didn't flinch, and he didn't look back. The Atlantic Express groaned to a stop in a part of the city Ryan never wanted to see. Pauper's Drop. If Adonis was a tomb and Ryan Amusements was a temple, Pauper's Drop was a wound, open and still bleeding. Rotting wood, makeshift shelters, canned food stacked beside rusted guns. It was the place the rich built their city on. Grace wasn't always a zealot. She used to be a jazz singer, full house at the Kashmir. But before the world cracked open, the lights dimmed and the money dried up. And the drop became home to all the folks Rapture forgot. She didn't turn to Lamb for power. She turned to her for hope. And when Lamb was betrayed and sent to prison, a request, take care of Eleanor. Delta continued to push through the back streets and broken apartments. And everywhere, he saw the messages. Lamb is watching. Reject the tyranny of self. We will be reborn. But these aren't just scribbles anymore. They're icons. Posters of Lamb like religious art. Butterflies painted over walls, machines, corpses. And the moment Delta arrived, Grace's voice filled the airwaves.
I remember you, monster. You stole Eleanor from me. Twisted that baby girl into a thing so sick it can't even die. And now you come swanning into my neighborhood looking for me. Wrong turn, Tin Daddy. When we hang you from a street light and you choking out your last, I want you to remember my face.
But Delta continues and fights through Pauper's Drop, eventually finding a safe house. Grace was holed up in a room behind a secret wall. Delta expected another ambush, but inside, no traps, no soldiers, just her, Grace Holloway, alone, unarmed, waiting. She didn't run, she didn't beg, she stared him down. The gun in Delta's hand was heavy. He didn't raise it. He turned and walked away. That was the choice. Not revenge, not obedience. Mercy. As Delta reached the exit, her voice came back through the intercom, not full of rage. Something changed.
You had me under a gun, yet you just walk away? No monster alive turns the other cheek. No monster does that. A thinking man does that. I know that Dr. Lamb is no liar, but she's got to be wrong about you.
She didn't thank him. She didn't forgive him. But something inside her shifted. Pauper's Drop wasn't a battlefield. It was a mirror. Lamb wanted to know, was Delta still the machine she built? Or something worse? Maybe something human. Well, she got her answer. And Eleanor, wherever she was, she felt it too. The train screeched to a halt in what used to be Rapture's red light district, Siren Alley. Pleasure houses, liquor dens, painted lips on every corner. Now, just rot. The district didn't get abandoned. It got claimed by the family's most extreme believers. Delta stepped into Siren Alley and walked straight through. Splicers lined the walkways, not just desperate addicts, but true fanatics. They didn't fight for Adam, they fought for Sophia Lamb. Graffiti covered the walls like creeping mold. We shall be reborn. Purple butterflies continue, marked doorways, furniture, corpses. But something's different. They didn't see Eleanor as a child anymore. They saw her as a prophet, one who would carry on Lamb's vision, the one who would complete the family. You could feel the desperation in every drawing, every prayer scrawled in blood and wax. At the center of this place was Simon Wells, once a preacher, now a fanatic. He rallied the faithful with rage, not from a pulpit, but from behind locked doors and sealed rooms. He didn't face Delta directly. He sent his splicers ahead instead, believers ready to die for Lamb. Delta still heard her voice, Eleanor, but it was growing faint, weaker. She was fighting, but land was pulling her deeper every second. The pumping station was Wells' stronghold, with traps set like scripture. He tried to drown Delta and followers, but Delta cut through them, and then through him. No glorious end, no final sermon. But Wells' death didn't go unanswered. Sophia Lamb overloaded the pumps. She would rather drown the entire district than let Delta pass. Flood alarms screamed, and the water came pouring in. Not vengeance, judgment. Delta ran through the city, splicers now drowned as the sea has swallowed them. But Siren Alley, it was lost. Just another broken sermon at the bottom of the sea. After escaping Popper's Drop, Subject Delta and Augustus Sinclair planned to head straight to Dionysus Park. After traversing the sea ground, Delta entered Dionysus Park through a maintenance airlock. What was once a glittering society and artistic space, an experiment in social unity, was now just another drowned hall in a dying city. Inside, Delta made his way to the train station where Sinclair had been trapped behind a locked control booth. That's when the voice came over the radio. Stanley Poole, a former reporter, and the moment Delta arrived, Poole made it clear he wouldn't open the way unless Delta did something for him. Stanley Poole feared that the Little Sisters gathering Adam in the park might recover genetic memories of what he had done. He was worried those memories would expose his betrayal to Sophia Lamb. So he gave Delta a choice. Clear all the Little Sisters in the park, or the train wasn't going anywhere. But as Delta rescued Adam from the Little Sisters, Eleanor, still linked to the others through their psychic bond, began to send him visions, memories, fragments, passed from the dead. These visions, Delta learned the truth. Stanley Poole had kidnapped Eleanor and handed her over to become a little sister. It was Stanley's betrayal that led Eleanor to become a little sister. Stanley also handed Delta over to Andrew Ryan, resulting and Delta being transformed into a Big Daddy. In a panic, Stanley flooded Dionysus Park to cover his tracks, and get rid of the little sisters would keep them buried forever. Every action that led to this present moment, the creation of Delta, the loss of Eleanor, the ruin of the park, could be traced back to Stanley. But when these memories came to light, Sophia Lamb contacted Delta, but she didn't deny what happened. She told him she already knew everything about Stanley's betrayal and let him live because he was useful. Her message was clear. Delta's pain, Eleanor's fate, had always been tools for her greater design. With all little sisters accounted for, Delta returned to the train station. Stanley was ready to hold up his end of the bargain, open the route, and let Delta pass. But Sophia Lamb opened the control room door herself, leaving Stanley fully exposed to Delta. There was no forced choice, no reward or punishment, just a decision. Delta could let Stanley live or kill him, but Delta again showed mercy. After Dionysus Park, the train takes subject Delta to the former corporate headquarters of Fontaine Futuristics, once the center of Rapture's scientific development and the heart of genetic research. Now, it serves a different purpose. Sophia Lamb had turned the facility into a research and conditioning complex for her plan to elevate Eleanor into a living embodiment of the family's ideas. And running the facility, at least in part, is a man thought long gone, Gil Alexander. Delta is guided through the facility by pre-recorded messages from Gil, once a lead scientist in Rapture's genetic experimentation. But something went wrong. Gil is no longer entirely himself. The voice on the tapes is clear, rational, but the Gil that exists now is something else. A slicer hybrid, mutated by overexposure to Adam and sealed in a containment chamber in the deepest part of the facility. But now, he is known as Alex the Great, a self-appointed title from when his mind started to fracture. Gil's earlier recordings reveal that he anticipated his own decline and left instructions for Delta to end his life if the mutation overtook his mind, which it has. And along the way, Eleanor continues to contact Delta more clearly than before, her voice becoming more stable. But Fontaine Futuristics is filled with recordings and equipment used to control memory and identity. These were originally used to brainwash test subjects, including Delta himself. It becomes clear that Project Alpha, the precursor to the Big Daddy program, was intended to preserve both physical strength and free will. Delta was one of the first of his kind. This is why Delta is so different from the other Big Daddies, and why he still follows the call of Eleanor. Their bond was rooted, making him unique among Lamb's enemies. Once the generators were reactivated and the lockdown lifted, Delta reaches the chamber where Gil Alexander now resides. Bloated, monstrous, nearly mindless, Gil speaks to Delta through the security systems and audio logs, revealing that he has lost control and urging Delta to honor his final wish. Here, Delta has another choice: obey Gil's final request and kill him, or spare him. Either way, Gil's story ends in the chamber where it began, as another scientist consumed by the same systems he once controlled. But again, Delta shows mercy. Delta now proceeds towards Persephone, a name borrowed from myth. But this was no goddess. This was Rapture's prison, a place to bury anything Ryan or Lamb wanted forgotten. Now, it was the last line between Subject Delta and the girl he was still bonded to, Eleanor. Persephone wasn't just a prison. It was Lamb's testing ground, a place where she can recondition inmates, break down dissidents, and reshape minds when sedation and memory alterations. Delta moved through the facility, finding audio logs from former prisoners, doctors, and Lamb herself. Some resisted, most were rewritten. This was where Lamb refined the methods as she planned to use for Eleanor, and maybe all of Rapture. Delta finally reaches Eleanor's holding cell, a sterile, windowed room deep in the containment wing. Eleanor lies asleep, but before Delta could reach her, Sophia Lamb intervenes. She doesn't speak to Eleanor. She speaks to Delta. She acts. Lamb places a pillow over Eleanor's face and smothers her. Not to kill her, just long enough to stop her heart and sever the bond between her and Delta. Delta collapses, lifeless, in the hallway. But in the end, the bond may be broken, but Eleanor isn't gone. What Lamb doesn't know is that her daughter had a plan of her own. Eleanor sends a little sister to inject something into Delta, something that would allow Delta to see through the eyes of the little sister and guide her. This is how Eleanor was able to help Delta, how she was able to hack the Vita chambers with Delta's DNA to bring him back without Sophia Lamb knowing. What was once a prison now appears as a golden palace, full of beauty and warmth, a hallucination shaped by the atom in her blood. But under the surface, something more important is happening. She's retracing Delta's path. As the little sister moves through the corridors, she passes shrines built in reverence or remembrance. These shrines reflect the choices that Delta has made. By sparing Grace, you see her shrine a symbol of forgiveness. If Stanley was spared, his presence is acknowledged differently. These scenes are visuals, no words, just silent moments to morality. Eleanor remembers what Delta chose, and those choices shape how this story ends. To escape to the surface, Eleanor needs protection, a body as strong as Delta's. Delta locates and retrieves a big sister suit. Piece by piece, the armor gathered. And once it's complete, Eleanor dons the suit, transforming herself into a fully capable big sister. But unlike the others, she retains her mind, her humanity. From here on, Eleanor fights alongside Delta. She uses telekinesis, teleportation, and plasmids to rip through the last of Lamb's splicers. This is no longer an escort mission. She is a true ally and fights with purpose. As they approach the escape chamber, Eleanor makes a choice of her own. She chooses to save all the remaining little sisters. She leads them to safety, away from Persephone, and away from the women who once tried to turn them into tools. After what seemed like endless fighting, Delta and Eleanor reached the bathysphere. But Delta, still wounded, won't survive the ascent. Still, he helps Eleanor board the vessel, and together they begin the final rise towards the world above.
And then, Father, the rapture dream was over. You taught me that evil is just a word. Under the skin, it's simple pain. For you, mercy was victory. You sacrificed, you endured, and when given the chance, you forgave. Always. Mother believed this world was irredeemable, but she was wrong, Father. We are Utopia, you and I, and in forgiving, we left the door open for her. The rapture dream is over, but in waking, I am reborn. This world is not ready for me, yet here I am. It would be so easy to misjudge them. You are my conscience, Father, and I need you to guide me.
And that's case file BS 68-2, closed. Delta's story didn't end with a headline or a hero's welcome. It ended the way most true things do, quiet, painful, and buried beneath too much weight. But he left something behind. Not a city, a legacy. He taught a girl how to think for herself in a world built to tell her who to be. He made her stronger, not with orders, but with his choices. And maybe that's all a man like him could hope for, not to survive rapture, but to leave it better than he found it. Now, if you excuse me, I've got a glass to fill and a desk light to shut off. But if you like this case file, go ahead and give a like and subscribe for the next case. Leave your theories down below, because down here, the truth's always got a little rust on it.